Okay, yeah. So I just wanted to reiterate that in the last session we covered like 5 stages of the transaction. In the in this session we will cover a bit about the optimizations that are done to reduce the number of network operations in the write transaction of replication. Once that is complete, we will also cover the read transactions in replication. Okay, so we will see two types of optimizations that are there that are available in these transactions. The first one is called eager locking and delaying the post op for streaming rights. So as we have discussed, there are like 5 transactions which are like 5 network operations. So this reduces the like like it increases the latency a lot. So we need to find a way of reducing the network operations as much as possible. So for that, what we will what GlusterFS did is to introduce streaming eager lock and delayed post up, using which you can reduce the number of operations on the over the network. So for example, so let's say okay, so we'll start VF slash dev 0 OF A. Let's just do like 100 operations. So if we look at this, even though the number of writes are like 800, we'll only see like very less number of like locks and these etc operations which are done for pre-op and post-op. So that is done because of an optimization called eager lock and delayed post-op. So the way it works is we'll now look at the code. So initially, whenever we take the lock, we take full file lock. Then after, so we when we take the lock, we take the full file lock. When we do a pre-op, which is like marking something as dirty, we do that also. The very first operation, we do this as well. Then we will actually do the operation. In this case, write. Okay, so once the write is complete, we actually are going to not do this post-op and unlock. We directly do like a stack unwind at this stage itself, responding to the FOP from kernel saying that the operation is done, and we wait for a second. Okay, so this is called as the delayed change log seconds. Yeah, post-op delay seconds. Okay, this is a configuration which will tell for how many seconds you can wait for the next operation to come. So I think by default it is 1 second. So default is 1 second. So if in the next 1 second, if no such operation comes, it will go ahead and do this post operation, which will do the under T of the extend attribute, and it will also do an unlock. So the way it does this is present in post-op, but before that we will also see what it does in pre-op. Yeah. So when we do this change log do, once this extra is done, we actually store some information like this change log its data, etc. Then we are going to do the for. Once this okay, yeah, so in this function, what we also do is uh, if there is eager, if uh, so this is like part of handling the eager log. So if 5 write operations come on the file at the same time, when that can happen is something like if when we did this DD, we are giving block size as 1 MB, but Fuse actually breaks it up into 128 KB writes. So we will actually get 8 such writes. So instead of sending 8 lock requests and 8 pre-op requests, we will send one lock request, and all of them will wait for the same lock and pre-op to complete. And once that are done, all these operations that are waiting on this lock and pre-op to be done, they will be woken up. Please note that this will not be done if the writes are conflicting. When we do a DD, all the writes are not conflicting, meaning the ranges of these writes, they don't overlap. So yeah, so that whenever they don't overlap, there are no conflicts, and in that case, we can share the same lock. So that is one way it reduces the locks. And as soon as the lock is complete and pre-op is complete, all these locks and all these operations, they will be woken up and resume in this function. So maybe I can also show the initial function which actually does putting of these things. Yeah, so this is like the eager lock handle. In this function, it actually checks whether the earlier lock is good enough or not. If it is there, you can like add it to the list of uh, list of uh, list of fobs that are actually waiting for the lock. So something like this. So there are like 3 cases or 4 cases, I think. We can discuss each one of them. If the previous lock needs to be unlocked, in that case, you need to pause the fob until the previous operation completes and it is unlocked. This can happen if there was a disconnect and a reconnect in between the previous operation and this operation. In that case, the event generation gets changed, and that will lead to a fresh lock acquisition. So that is one case. Whenever such things happen, it will set this lock release to true, which indicates the lock to be unlocked, and the all optimizations will be disabled whenever this lock release is set to true. Okay, and the other one is if somebody has already set the lock to true, lock release to true, then this operation, this transaction is actually added to the wait list. I'm sorry, in the frozen list, which are like, you are waiting for the unlock to happen and the next generation to start. The other case is when this delay timer is there. So this delay timer is related to the post-op delaying by 1 second. So whenever this is not null, that means somebody has already done like somebody is already waiting. Okay, so now you need to stop that delay timer because you are going to become the owner. So you try that canceling of that timer. If the canceling fails, which means the event has already fired to do the unlock, then you will again do the same thing of adding it to the frozen list like we did before. Otherwise, you are becoming the owner. Okay, so that is how it is. The other option is there are already some operations that are in progress, and there are some operations whose owners are already added to the owner list for that lock. Then if the lock is not acquired, or the lock has conflict, then you will have to be added to the waiting list. Otherwise, you will be added to the owner list, and you can go ahead with your with your operation. Please note that this is only for eager lock part. Okay, so you can see that the take lock is false, but do pre-op is true. All right. So so eventually everything gets added to the owners list if it has to move either by in this function, or when the lock acquisition completes and the shared lock owners are awoken, like we saw a bit before. Now, if do pre-op is present, then it will try to do the pre-op. But in this case, it will see if you can inherit the pre-ops from before. That is, like, if you have some operations that are in progress which have already done the marking required to do the operation, then you will you will actually see that okay, this pre-op is already done for this this transaction, so I will just inherit these transactions pre-op and post-op values. So you will set this transaction to inherited to true. That is like, you have already done the network operation. You are like piggybacking on this pre-op done by some other transaction. So this will also prevent one more network transaction, because we are going in the optimized way. So it will just say that, okay, I'm done with the pre-op operation, and I'll go to the next, which is like the actual FOP. Okay. Now, at some point, you will complete this operation also, in which case it will do the post-op. Yeah. So once the FOP completes, it will call transaction resume. Then it will do this change log post-op. Here, everything that is reverse of what happened in eager lock and pre-op will happen, which is like, it will see whether the delayed change log is needed. Okay, 1 second, we can just take a look at these things. So these are all like cases where we can't do the optimization. If the operation fails at some point, you are not going to use the optimizations. If there are conflicting operations waiting, then also you kind of have to do the release. This is like you have some other client waiting on this operation to complete, which is gathered in the operation with the transaction. When it sends the transaction, the right transaction, let's say, to all the bricks, it will also query whether there are any other clients that are waiting for this operation. So that is gathered in this variable whenever such thing happens. And it will check whether any other clients are waiting for these operations to complete, and if there are other clients, then also it will have to release. In like other cases, you can actually say that I will go with the what is it called, the delaying of the post-op. And in that case, you will set the post op to false, and you're not going to do the post op. And in cases where you have to do the post op, then also you have this post op. Now let's say you are going to do the post op. There are like two paths to do the post op. One is, in some cases you have to do an fsync. So this function covers the fsync. So there is a big comment about why you need to do the fsync, but like if it finds there is some unstable write which cannot be easily detected, then it will do an fsync to make sure that all the data is written correctly. After that, it will trigger a post op. In this post op, what it will do is the reverse of what it has done before. So it will do an uninherit, which is to see if this is an inherited one, like if the post op is something that has been if the pre-op is piggybacked by other transactions, it will see whether it can just do this inherited minus minus and say that, okay, there is nothing to do. So this is an optimized path. Okay, so in that case, it won't send any operation on the wire. Otherwise, it will have to go with the marking, where it has to do the -1 for dirty, and if there are any failures, it will have to do a +1 for these replica subvolumes to indicate that some the operation has failed on some subvolume. So that will be handled here. And once this post op is done, it will eventually do the unlock. Even at the time of here. Even at the time of unlock, it will do something similar to what it was doing before. It will see whether there are other owners on the lock or not. If there are other owners, then it can't send an unlock over the wire. So when all the owners are done, then it will do this unlock. So that is the optimization for the write transaction. Chetan, did you understand? Are there any doubts?
No, fine.
Okay, cool. Okay. Once this is done, like we will see the other kind of optimization is skipping off the pre-op and operation for metadata and entry transactions. So in AFR, for the transaction for metadata and entry operation, that is like creations and deletions, we sometimes may choose to skip these pre-op and post-op operations to reduce the number of network operations. The reasoning is that as soon as it detects a failure or whatever, it will do this whatever needs to be marked as pending, etc., right away in this operation like post op. But in success case, it will just do a lock, it will do an op, and it will do an unlock. Okay. And the reason why, so the code is similar to that of the same things basically. If it is a pre-op, then there is like this concept called optimistic change log, and if optimistic change log is there, then it will not do pre-op or post-op if everything is successful. So the code is a bit simple, but the reasoning is important here, which is like why are we skipping these two things? Like if there is a problem, how will you detect? So that becomes an important. So the client tries to do the best it can to create the state as if there was a failure, as long as the client is available. So if your client will take a lock, let's say it is a create operation, it will create let's say a file A on all the bricks in the replica, and if one of them fails, it will mark the extended attribute saying it failed on so and so replica. So that way it is kind of making it equivalent, as if the pre-op and post-op are done. So if there is a failure detected in op phase, in post-op it will do the necessary marking. But then the next question is like, what if before this post-op can happen, the client crashes or client loses connection to all the replicas? So even in that case, it is okay, because the both entry operations and metadata operations, in one lookup you will know what is the state of that file on all the bricks. In case of write operations, it is not easy to find out whether the files are in consistent state or not, just by looking at that file, like a stat operation or a single network operation will not tell you whether everything is fine or not. So for I'm like, if you want to find out if the data is same on all the replicas, you have to look at the contents of the complete file, which will need the reading of the complete file, which is a problem. But in case of these metadata and name operations, if you just do a stat on that name and which is like a lookup operation, extended attributes and stat, it will give you, which is like a constant operation, and with one network operation you will get all that information. So once you have that information, you know if there is any problem with that name or metadata, and you can, like, do whatever you could not do when it died. So it is not a problem to employ such a optimization. Did that make sense, Chetan?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so if let's say, just to complete that example, let's say if you create a file A, and let's say it got created on just 2 bricks, and on the third brick, let's say it did not create, and the mount point itself died. When you, let's say you did a mount again on of that volume, or from some other mount, when you try to access that file A, when you do a lookup on that name A, you know that the name is missing on another subvolume.
Yeah.
So you can do the necessary healing and act as if everything is fine. Okay, so that is why this optimization is also okay. So yeah, so that completes our write operations. Now we can move on to read operations. So this is a relatively less complicated compared to the write operations. It's there are like 3 main things that the read transaction does. One is actual performing of the read, which may involve figuring out from which brick I need to read the data or do a stat or whatever. The second one is if that operation, if that brick dies just at the time of doing the operation, what should happen? Then how will you load balance in the read, and how will you make best use of the available resources that you have? So these 3 are the main things that are going to be covered in this rest of the session. So there are like this I have already mentioned, like the refresh may happen, the actual operation, and then handling of failures. So let's look at the code. So all the operations that are supposed to do reads, which is like stat, fstat, get etc, fget etc, read v, etc, all these forks, they will implement this. They will use this transaction. We will cover read v because that is like the main fork for doing the read operation. So as you can see, like this is the transaction. To perform this transaction, whatever data it needs, it will store it in the respective data structures. This is for fixing the OpenFD problem. So this let's skip for now. In the AFR read transactions, what it will do is it will, okay, so these are all your validation checks. If the quorum is not present, then you should not do the operation. If there are some consistent IO options and if it is not possible, then also you are not going to continue the operation. For pin arbiter, there are some extra validations. So all these things from here till here, like all of these are validations. But once the validations are all fine, then you need to find out which subvolume you will choose to do the operation. So this is where the load balancing part actually comes, which we will cover maybe a bit later. But so then the other thing is, how do you know which bricks have good copies? So that is the other part that is covered. So like if we look at this read subvolume get, it will basically see what is the information I have when I did the lookup last. So at the time of lookup, based on the external attributes that are present on these directory slash files, you actually know which subvolumes have good copy because of the the pending external attributes or data external attributes that are present on the inode. Okay, so that information is actually decoded, and you actually create these data structures where it says, like, uh, it will be 1 if this data is good, if metadata of I will be 1 if metadata is good. So that is what it will create, and it will give this arrays back. And it will do an intersection between this data and metadata to see if there exists some bricks which have both data and metadata to be good. Okay, and after that, it will also see whether the inode refresh is required. This is like, it will basically check whether the in-memory data that you have about which bricks are good is still valid or not, which will happen the bricks will actually communicate in some cases where it will say, okay, then they need refresh. And even if there are some transaction failures, in that case also this need refresh will be set to true. And if it is set to true, then you are supposed to do this read transaction. So, and this policy is where the load balancing happens. This we will look at it at the end. But yeah, so let's look at the refresh part now. So if no refresh is required, you can, it will just set up that I'm attempting a read on so and so subvolume, and it will call this read transaction wine. But what happens in refresh basically? This, I think you may guess. So when you are trying to do a refresh of the inode, you're basically doing a lookup. So it will get the external attributes, information, etc. Yeah, either if the operation is on an FD, it will do an fstat and fget etc. If it is the operation on a LOC, then it will do it based on lookup. But essentially, you will get the current state of the inode, which inodes have good data metadata at the end. And once that is gathered, it will set it in the inode context. If so, yeah, and once that part is done, it will say refresh is done. There is also this code to trigger heal, which may also happen. But yeah, so yeah, so this replies interpret is how it actually is going to populate which subvolumes are good and which subvolumes are bad. So which are actually a bit simple. So you basically get the external attributes and you do the same computation as to which ones are accused which ones are not accused, and if some subvolume is accused, then you mark that as bad. If it's not accused, then it is good. So it's a simple interpretation of the external attributes. So yeah, so this is like the crux of the algo. You see if somebody is accused, then it is not readable. Otherwise, it's readable. So that is how it will be. Once that happens, it will yeah. So this is like the triggering of the heal part. So in some cases, even the clients can trigger the heal if it is enabled. But if nothing such is required, then it will basically eventually call transaction refresh done, and it will resume from where it paused before, which like it will get the read subvolume and okay, not in this. Okay, so it will basically call this a refresh function, which is going to be called in inode refresh at the beginning. So we'll go to read transaction.c again. Yeah, so here this is the callback. So it will call this one. Basically it is resuming from where it left off. It is getting the read subvolume again by policy. Then 1 second. Yeah, so it just got that if it is next subvolume. Yeah, so here in this case it is going to start doing the winding of that actual fork. So this is something that this local readfn, this is actually set at the time of you calling into the AFR read transaction. So we can, where is the, yeah, so when we call AFR read transaction like this is the wind call. So that gets remembered basically as the read function. So yeah, so this is stored here. So this is what is going to get called. So basically we go into this function, which is basically going to do the actual operation, be it read or stat or get etc or whatever. Then if the operation is successful, then you will just unwind the operation and you are basically done. If you are if it is not successful, then is what we were saying about this handling of failures. So the transaction, you again call into the transaction framework. It basically will check if the refresh was already happened in the flow that we are following. The refresh already happened. If it did not happen, it will do the refresh again. Then it will try the same operation on some other subvolume that is good. So it will check whether the read up is attempted already on this subvolume. If it is not, then it will try it on that subvolume. So like that, it will keep doing this read transaction on all until it exhausts all the subvolumes that are there, or it succeeds, one of the two. So that is how it handles failure. So if it is replica 3, in the worst case, you will send the 3 read operations where previous 2 read operations failed. So that is how it will be. So this is how the read transaction handles failures in replication. Any doubts there, Chetan?
No, fine.
Cool. Then we only have the load balance strategies. So this is actually something that has been evolving. So when I joined, there was only one read it is like, first up subvolume used to get the read traffic. Then like, once you have like replica 2 or replica 3, you basically start wondering why not send the reads to multiple subvolumes. So what was done is, like, most of the deployments had a lot of files. So we kind of do the hash of that GFID, and based on that hash, you pick which subvolumes to send the read to. So this is something that is default actually. This has served very well. One more thing that people also wanted to try was, you can do this hashing based on the file, but if there are lots and lots of clients that are accessing the uh, same file a lot, then again the same brick will become the bottleneck. So to address that, you kind of take into both the GFID and the PID of that client, you combine them and you hash that, so that there is some like, load balance between everything. So even if there are like, 1,000 clients, all those 1,000 clients will not go to the same subvolume to read that file and choke that. So it is to handle that case where you have too many clients. The other one, this is something interesting. I think this gets used if like there is only one client, but it keeps reading the same data or same file again and again. So what happens in this case is, like, you keep a count of how many read requests you have sent to a certain subvolume, and every time you pick the one with the least number of outstanding requests. So if you have sent the first request to the first subvolume, then the second request you will send it to either the second or the third subvolume, something like that. And it also caters to the like, the latency of the bricks. Like, if one brick because of load or whatever, it is serving requests a bit slowly, then automatically the load will shift to the other two bricks that are present. And the fourth one is the ping late this. So this is like based on the latency. So you, at the time of ping, you kind of figure out which one has the least amount of latency, and you try to send it to that one. This is like a hybrid of 3 and 4, where you are like going to multiply the latency and the outstanding read requests and balance based on that. So this was done probably 2 years back. This is the latest load balancing strategy. So in future you may come to more strategies, but like, as it stands now, these 5 are active, and and all of these things are done as part of this policy selecting. One second. Yeah, I think this is the one. Yeah. Policy. Yeah. Where is it?
So fifth one is the default now.
No, second one is the default always. Oh yeah, so this hash tail is the function which has all these policies. So hash mode is the option you can use to change things if you don't like something or any other reason like that. Like, based on your use case, you can change this hash mode, and based on that, it will do the necessary things. Like, first up, GFID hash, GFID and PID hash. So like, when you're trying to do this hash computation, you're also going to use PID. The less load, it actually keeps track of what request you sent where. And least latency is based on latency, and the final one is based on these two. So you can actually modify this in AFR. Let's say like read hash mode is the, yeah. So this is the option that you can change. One thing we should have done is, instead of these numbers, we should have gone by the names at the time of coming up with this. But yeah, this is what we have done, which was wrong. But yeah, so this is one thing that actually is used for load balancing between the replicas. So, but again, like one thing is always going to be there, which is if a brick is not good, it will not be considered for reading whatever mode that you select here. So this mode is applicable only if that brick is good. Otherwise, it won't come into force.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. So that I think completes the read part of the transaction also. Any doubts here, Chetan?
No, fine.